Let me explain it. The way that it should be viewed is whenever you go out and you're looking to hire the agent that represents the seller, it's the same type of scenario, except for the numbers are much larger when it comes to real estate versus going and buying a vehicle. Now, of course, the price of admission to selling vehicles, there's a lot built into that particular craft. And I don't know about you, but when I go to a dealership, if I'm going to be dealing with the salesman at the dealership, which eventually we all do, it's nice to have somebody that really knows their craft. And it's quite honoring, but somebody new or somebody that doesn't have the experience and doesn't have all the training, well, it's just not as easy. Then in real estate, same thing exists, except the price of admission to become a real estate agent is passing the California real estate exam, which has about a 50% failure rate, believe it or not. So it's very, very high, very tricky. But there is nothing really else. You can have your GED, a college diploma, be 18 years old, you don't need any other experience, and then you can get your license. Now, whether a brokerage is going to hire you without any experience, that's another level, something else to look at. But let's go back to the car dealership and my comparison here with purchasing a vehicle versus purchasing a residence. Now, it's really kind of the same in a way, because when you're going to the dealership, you don't have anybody with you unless you take dad or mom or you have somebody in your family. But typically, your representative purchasing a vehicle is really yourself and whoever else happens to maybe know about that business. It would be kind of cool if there was somebody there that was a professionally trained car purchaser that knew all the ins and outs about the dealership, what invoicing pricing is, what that sticker price is, what all those charges are on the windshield. It would be cool if somebody could go in there and just pull all those apart very quickly, but typically it's a time thing. So when you go into a car dealership, hours and hours go by, and basically it's a wear you down scenario if you're one of those people that are trying to get their best deal. But that person at the dealership is representing the dealership. Just like when you go into an open house, I have Santa Clarita openhouses.com. So you go into a majority of those open houses on there, the ones that are posted online, you will find out that that agent inside the open house is representing the seller. Now, in some cases, other agents will host those open houses open just to try to get leads and clients of their own, because the listing agent or the ones that has that particular listing might be too busy or not interested. Or again, statistically, open houses don't really sell open houses, but they do great for agents as far as leads and those sorts of things. So you go to that particular agent, let's say it happens to be the one representing the seller, and now you're hiring the person working for the seller, very synonymous with you going into a car dealership alone and then working with the agent representing the car dealership. They want to get the best for the seller. Now, there are a lot of rules in place, ethics and things like that will prohibit the agent from doing bad things, but they know the seller's bottom line, and then if you use them to purchase the residence, they know your bottom line. A lot of cases, the seller will build in a commission for you to bring your own agent, because even sellers don't really care for it sometimes when their agent represents the buyer as well. And where they run into this is when their agent representing the buyer on your behalf as a buyer is submitting a request for repairs or wanting some kind of credits or discounts because of things discovered in the property that their buyer, well, their buyer because they're working for the seller, but that particular buyer now working with the seller's agent has decided that they don't want to move forward unless the seller does these certain things, which typically equate to money. And sellers don't like that, of course. And who does, right? Who wants to pay more money to have something done or a particular service or even to sell their house? Now, there are people out there that understand the way it works. If there's something broken in a property that was not known before, even to the seller's knowledge, even if they're not going to sell it, usually they're going to fix it. This is an entire other discussion, but just to talk about how it actually works, now you have that agent representing the seller who's now also representing the buyer, going back to the seller and saying, hey, the buyer wants this. A lot of times that turns off the seller. And most cases, the seller doesn't really care for the dual agency, which is actually outlawed in a few states, but it's still legal here in California, and it may be for quite some time. We'll have to keep watch. I know it's a discussion that keeps going on and on and on, but right now, sellers are willing to pay a buyer's agent in a lot of cases to represent the buyer in purchasing the property, so the buyer doesn't have to pay that fee. Historically, usually the sellers did, but because of contractual changes and lawsuits, and basically this January, if you're going to go out to look at real estate listings, besides going to open houses, if you're going to go with a specific agent, they'll have you sign a buyer-broker agreement, which will then establish what they're going to get paid and how they're going to get paid. Are you going to pay them? Are they going to ask the seller to pay them? So on and so forth. So you can look at the document. Don't be scared of it. Just look at it. And in fact, if you have questions, of course, it's not the end all solve all, but you can take that PDF that they send you before you sign anything and plug it into one of the large language models like Grok 3 or ChatGPT or one of those and say, hey, what do you think about this particular document? They're pretty smart. They'll give you some ideas. Of course, always trust your family. If you have an attorney, those types of things, those aren't bad sources to ask. But if you're going it alone, don't really have anybody to call upon to get their help, just plug it into that large language model, one of the AIs, and say, hey, what do you think about this? You are the top consummate real estate expert in the world, a top tier attorney, blah, blah. And just ask them to produce for you what they believe about this particular buyer's contract that you're going to be signing. On there, we'll establish a length of time. It'll establish what type of residences that are going to qualify, where the residences happen to be located, or it could be everything, just very non-specific. But the period of time typically right now is about 90 days. So that will be the length of most of the buyer-broker agreements, except they can also be shorter. I'm Connor with Honor. I hope this helped explain a little bit about the dual representation model going into open houses. And again, when you go in, you might feel completely comfortable with the agent, but remember, they are on the seller's side. That's what the seller hired them for. And in some cases, maybe the seller doesn't care that they represent the buyer as well, but believe you me, I've been doing this since 1998. It's a very interesting condition when the buyer wants something that the seller already told that agent that worked for them originally, 100% that they weren't going to do this and this. Now the buyer is asking that same agent to take back to the seller to do this and this. It creates a little bit of issue. I'm Connor with Honor. We'll see you in the next one.